Hello, and welcome to the Angus and Pete Show. Views and opinions are strictly those of the presenters and their guests and should not be taken as advice. Goodness knows, we're not qualified to advise you about anything. Side effects may include mild amusement and occasional enlightenment with feelings of embarrassment, apathy, disappointment, and pity.
Welcome to episode 9. I'm Angus Pacey.
And I'm Pete Brown, and we are the Angus and Pete Show.
The podcast where you can listen to two guys chatting about that riveting world of customer engagement.
AKA call centre, contact centre, customer service, customer experience, CX, and whatever else you're calling it this week.
For those of you that want to know more about us, check us out on LinkedIn.
So, Angus, it's that time where one of us asks the question, what's in the post bag?
Well, lucky for us, first one is Nick from Churchdown. Now,
Churchdown? Where's Churchdown?
I've got no idea where. I've got absolutely... Okay. It's somewhere in the UK.
Oh, hi, Nick from Churchdown.
So Nick says, really enjoyed the last episode. Spot on with how it's being positioned. He's talking about the discussion that we had last episode about AI and how to talk about AI to business people.
Yeah.
He said there's a lot of generic knowledge around LLMs and Gen AI, but very few people out there are really providing the answers to how it will be better for customer engagement and agents' lives.
Thanks, Nick.
Second one, and I think this is topical for those of you in the UK. Charlie from York says, what do you think about HMRC forcing people to use digital services by providing crap telephone services? So for those of you that are not in the UK and do not know what that four-letter acronym HMRC stands for, it's the UK taxman.
Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs.
Yeah. Or Her Majesty's Revenue Collection Services.
Indeed. So, yes, apparently, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs has been accused by a watchdog and investigated by the Public Accounts Committee, part of the UK Parliament. And they've been point blank accused of running a poor, in fact, when you look at the stats, a diabolical telephone service with a view to forcing people to use their online and digital services. And they've come out and said, absolutely not, we're not doing that. But I'm just looking at some stats here. In the first 11 months of the tax year, HMRC cut off 43,690 people just because they've been waiting in a queue for 1 hour and 10 minutes or longer, which is a 535% increase on the 6,875 that they cut off the year before. Still an impressive number. So if they're not trying, what the hell's going on? And if they are trying, they're doing a bloody good job, I would say. I also have to say, as a customer of HMRC, their digital services aren't bad, but it's a bit brutal, forcing people that are phoning them, because we know, Angus, that digital channels are great, but people pick the phone up when they want to talk to somebody, and they want to talk to somebody when they're in trouble. So HMRC, we're paying for you. We're paying for your telephone system, whatever it is. Buck your ideas up.
Emma from Austria, it was quite interesting. I was talking to some of the partners that I come across during the week. And she said to me, it's great to hear all about AI in customer engagement and what everybody's talking about. She said, I work for a reseller who's really struggling to move from an on-prem business model to the cloud.
Right.
So her question was, how do we need to restructure our business so that we can catch up and really take advantage of this opportunity that's facing everybody? That was the third one, and I think that's worth talking about.
You and I have both been heavily involved with that reseller and partner community in our careers for some time now. Everyone was comfortable with the on-prem world, and then the cloud came along. And that was the first signal to the reseller community that things were going to change away from that capital expenditure, big lumps of money, install it and take support revenue model and move into a true as-a-service revenue-based model. I've had meetings in the last couple of weeks, and I know that you've had many. There seems to be a theme developing. Many resellers, as I would say the vast majority, are really struggling to move their business models, their people, even their thinking from the old on-prem world where technology resided in your customers' offices to this whole new as a service world, and they want some tips on where to focus when it comes to building a customer engagement and CX practice that's fit for this new world. So we're going to try and cover that in the next 25 minutes or so. Where do we start, Angus? Where do we start?
If you think about it, we're building a framework of steps, tick boxes if you want. The first thing that you must have in place is a relationship with the vendors that are providing the services. So you got to choose who you're going to get into bed with. Could be one, could be a couple. I would not get too many of them because you don't have the bandwidth generally to absorb too many vendors.
How many vendors? Is there an optimum number? I guess all the vendors want you to work with one vendor, and all the resellers want to have as much choice as possible.
I don't think there's an optimum number. I think it depends on what your customer profile looks like, what your target market profile looks like, are you going after very large enterprises, you're going after small, medium businesses. I don't think there's an optimum number. Just think about your ability internally to absorb what is required.
I guess also, as a process and a framework, to a large degree, that's going to be vendor independent. So it can be adapted in terms of detailed knowledge to specific vendors, but fundamentally the way that you structure your practice, the way that you structure your resources around that is going to be vendor independent.
Yeah, it's a business model change, and your business model is not dictated by any. It shouldn't be dictated by any specific vendor. Have the basics. Have the vendor. Make sure if you've got to buy through distribution that you can tick that box. And all the requirements that go around from whoever you pick, what's required to participate in their programs, what training, all that sort of stuff. So tick those boxes really on. Just understand it.
So if I'm a reseller that's relatively new to this, what sort of things am I expected to go through? You just mentioned training and certifications. What does that mean? What am I in for?
Well, most vendors would tick the technical boxes. So they're going to say you've got to do some sort of online training that's quite easy, high level, proposition level type stuff. Then you will probably need to send any number of people on more heavy duty technical courses, how to configure the platforms, how to deploy them, all those different things. And they're going to be a bunch of exams that they need to do to prove that they actually know what they're talking about. It's your golden ticket into the ecosystem. You've got to have enough people to be able to do things. There is a monetary hurdle to this generally. Very few vendors do that heavy technical training for free. They might do bits and pieces for free to suck you in as carrots, but there's technical training. So I think about that as an upskilling technical investment that you need to make.
Okay. So once you've got your badges, what defines a contact center practice? What is it?
Well, think about it as a dedicated group within the organization. Some people can call it a business unit, some call it a practice. That's the big name at the top. Anybody that believes you can go and train a couple of people and then go forth into the community and go and hunt and farm and it'll all be successful will fail every single time. You've got to have a business plan. You've got to recognize that you're going to have to commit resources across the business to this. It's not just salespeople, which is what a lot of people think. You've got to have resources lined up. You've got to figure out what you're going to want to achieve in different time horizons, short term, medium term, longer term. And then you've got to see whether this is going to stack up for you, because the sales cycles on contact center customer engagement solutions are very different to shifting boxes.
So a couple of things there then. In terms of the scope of a contact center practice from a resource perspective, we've got not just salespeople and business development people, but we've got technical support, implementation, consultancy type roles running in there as well. And I guess based on what you just said, whether you are migrating an existing practice from the old world to the new world, or whether you're building something from scratch, leadership buy-in is key. This isn't something that a group of middle managers and general staff put together. It needs leadership focus.
This is not a cottage industry. This is not going to be a shadow activity. So, if you're a pre-sales engineer or a mid-level manager, you're not going to get this right unless you've got the the top bought into it, and that we see every single time. That's definitely the case.
One of the biggest sources of drag and friction in terms of moving this forward is typically leadership struggling with the idea that their revenue model is going to change. They want to have the recurring revenue model that all businesses strive for, but they're very concerned about the risk that goes with moving too quickly or in an uncontrolled way from a different model, which is all about big lumps of cash in the capex model, good for your cash flow, but a very different thing to revenue. So I guess having that senior level buy-in and having not just a focus on making this thing happen, but also a focus on funding it and investing in it correctly is going to be absolutely key to success.
Extending that thought, it's going to affect how people are paid from a sales perspective as well.
Yeah.
We've all seen salespeople in multiple different organizations. They're thinking 12 inches in front of their noses and how they can hit their targets. You tell them that you've suddenly got 12-month sales cycles and it's going to take 3 years to realize the revenue, and this is what's going to happen to your commission. That can shape behavior. So some thought needs to go into this, because if you don't pull the right levers, you're going to struggle.
So what does success look like? What are the characteristics of a successful contact center customer engagement practice?
So a couple of things. You've got to have a well-defined portfolio of services that you're going to take to market, where you're going to add value. So you've got to be able to articulate that value proposition.
Okay.
The other thing that you've got to have is identified resources that span from business development all the way through sales, technical support, adoption, training. You need to have those resources in the right place, playing the right roles, and you've got to be able to name check them. You've got to know who's in there. This is not going to happen just by accident. Then when you're going to engage with your customers, you've got to have a consistent framework that's repeatable. You cannot bespoke or invent it for each customer. It will break the bank at that point. You can't go and bespoke it. You've got to find a repeatable model. But also you've got to think about it end to end. Your professional services don't start with consulting and end when the order's booked. Then you've got to get people using it, because if people don't use it, you're never going to repeat the business with a customer. They'll move.
Right. So we've spoken about a move from the old world to the new world, that on-prem, selling bits of equipment and tin, to selling services that exist in the cloud. So what you're really saying is you've got to structure this business to be able to stand a move away from reselling technology to driving the adoption of services.
Yeah.
Right.
People don't use your software. When it comes to the end of that term of the contract that you sold them,
yeah,
they're gone. 9 times out of 10, they'll go and look for the next new shiny thing. So you'll lose the customer.
As Sky TV found out just last week, when I withdrew my custom after being messed around by them for just 1 year too many. Thanks, Sky.
And now you have much faster and sexier broadband than you had previously.
I do.
So people must absolutely consider that building expertise in the business and having differentiated capability services is not a one-time activity. It is ongoing. You have to adjust and refine, not only as you learn with customers, but also as the market moves. So you've got to consciously be thinking about that. It's a process, but it's a journey as well. The other thing is that if you look at customer experience, contact center solutions, all the sort of digital that goes around that and the evolving AI, it is going to need specialized expertise. This is not the same as just picking up a box and dropping it and installing a bit of software or for download or a USB stick. It's specialized. It is going to require people that actually understand what they're talking about, or you're going to have to train people. And you don't have to do it all yourself. There are other routes to bringing this expertise into the business. So there are other companies that specialize in helping you. That's their business model. They provide services and expertise to other resellers. Now, some of the vendors provide services and do that directly. You can also collaborate with partners that are very experienced in this and go through a crawl, walk, run process if you want to do that, so that you can do the first couple of deployments, learn from them, they'll teach you, and then you can pick it up.
So there's a lot going on here. We know that it can be very lucrative if it's done properly. So there's definitely a compelling business reason to make this move, particularly if you're looking longer than that 12 inches away from the end of your nose and you're looking at the medium to long term. If I'm a reseller and I'm investing in not just an expansion of services, but a restructure of my business, and not just investing cash, but taking risk, how do I know that those vendors can be trusted to support me? When you've got that adoption of services tail on it, it's going to require resellers and vendors to maintain that relationship in the interest of the customer, work closely together. What do you think?
This goes back to what we said right at the top. Pick your vendors that you're going to get into bed with. Not all vendors have the same philosophy. Some of them are very channel focused, channel only, business go-to-market business models, and they are set up to do that, and they have been doing that for a long time. Other vendors are direct, and if a customer holds a gun against their head, then they will allow an order to go through a channel partner. And quite often partners fall for that. Resellers fall for this because the vendor comes to them, hands them a massive deal, boosts their revenue line for 1 week, and then that vendor shafts them and goes off and does the next deal directly. Some vendors have a go-to-market model that says, direct if I can, I will use a partner if I must.
Yeah.
You know, there are many different things. So
Yeah.
I was looking at the Oxygen 250 report on resellers out of the UK today.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually coined a term in that report, which is the vendor befrienders.
Vendor befrienders.
The vendor befrienders. And it's a report that's just been published that ranks all the UK resellers, essentially, top to bottom, 1 to 250 odd. I think the clue's in the name, Oxygen 250.
Yeah.
And they counted how many times each of those resellers mentioned the vendors that they work with. So it's a very blunt metric. How many times are you name checked? I think number one on that list was Microsoft. They were number one. They had 105 mentions. Cisco came in second at 61. And you go down to the bottom in our space, Avaya, 7.
7, that many?
7. They were still mentioned, but I'll tell you, going through the other vendor names in there are some glaring omissions of vendors that everybody in our space knows.
Well, okay.
So I think I'm not punting any one of those vendors, but I think I'm just pointing out, and this is in the public domain, you can go and download it. This is not put out by any vendor. Look very carefully at what that reseller vendor relationship is, because that affects your profitability. It affects all the services that supports you. It affects how they go to market, what resources they put in play. Have an honest look at everything, not just which event and which giveaways they gave you when you went to the last hotel.
Okay, there's a lot to think about there. Is there a way of boiling this down into a process to at least give some structure to the complexity that is inevitable with this thing?
Yeah, so I think they're 4 processes and they're not serial. I think that's the first thing. They're not necessarily serial. They can be run in parallel in different phases. I'll put them in no specific order. The first one is make sure that you're focusing on your organizational readiness. Prioritize in your organization's work streams that you're going to develop a new practice. And the key to that is to make sure that you've got the senior execs committed to what you're doing and that there's a leadership team assigned to this. This is key. And as part of that initial stuff that you do, build your business plan, model what that financial performance can look like, and don't go with the best guess. What's your best case? What's your worst case? What's your likely case? Whatever your number is that you put down as your best case, 25% of that is probably going to be your likely case. So don't be too optimistic. Be a realist. Rather be surprised than have to come back with your tail between your legs. The second one is look at what your offer and services portfolio is going to look like to customers. What are you going to offer your customers? Look at who you're going to be selling to. Highlight out which customers you're going to target and which segments you're going to target, because how you go to market for a small company is very, very different to what you're doing in large customers. But the other thing, and you know me, Pete, this is my hobby horse, absolutely identify what the pain point or the problem is before you map what your offer is. Please do not be like most idiots that pick up a new piece of technology and then go, I have a solution, let's go and look for a problem, and then wonder why they fall on their noses in the first 5 yards. And then start thinking about how you're going to develop those practice capabilities in professional services and adoption services, but also then identify how can you get into the market quickly. So do you partner with somebody? Then the next one, focus on your operations. Finalize it, figure out how you're going to launch it, put your resource plans in place. What's your framework for engaging with customers? How are you going to contract with them? What are your service level KPIs, all those different things. The other thing which a lot of resellers don't think about is what is the process for working with the vendor and other partners? Because when you're selling these things, there are always components that come from other people. So how are you going to manage that relationship? Who's going to look after those relationships? And then start thinking about enabling your sales teams. I wouldn't start enabling sales teams until you've done a lot of those steps before, because they're going to have questions. And if you do not have very good answers for them, then you're going to lose them. So having your sales teams on board and having their confidence means that you do that at the right time and the right level.
So we've covered organizational readiness, evolving that customer engagement and services portfolio, establishing operational readiness. And the last one is?
Go-to-market plan. How are you actually going to get into the market? What metrics are you going to use to measure whether you're being successful in whichever segment, whichever customer? Put a marketing plan together so that you can create awareness. Believe me, you can do all this work internally. You've got to tell people about it. And you've got to give them a chance to engage with you. And then at that point in time, make sure, as part of your go-to-market, when are you going to start training your salespeople? What are you going to do? Is their comp plans and their pay packets aligned into what your objectives are? But also the other one is look at which customers you're going to go after. Now, do some account planning. And I would also pilot stuff. When you are early in this process, it's all new. You're going to try stuff. Some of it is going to succeed brilliantly, and a lot of it is going to fail. Now, that's not a bad thing. Recognize that something's failed. Sit back, do a bit of a debrief and go, right, let's tune this, change that, try again. Expect for the sort of 12 to 18 months, you're going to do a lot of learning, a lot of tuning, a lot of changing until you settle on something. You've been listening to me waffle for a little bit.
So, I have. Again.
Distill it down. What would you say the takeaways are?
If I'm Emma, remember the lady who asked this question, the original question in Austria? I think I've heard the following. First thing is, you must acknowledge that you need to change. You must acknowledge that there's a need to move from that old on-prem world to the new as-a-service world, to that old CapEx revenue model, to the new recurring revenue model, and everything that goes with it. And that acknowledgement will undoubtedly come from all parts of the business, but crucially, it needs to come from the top as well. So that's the first thing. With that in place, you can then make a conscious decision about that move, either changing your existing practice or creating a new one, keeping a firm eye on what's really changing, which is moving away from reselling technology in the old world to the driving adoption of services in the new world. Be prepared for different business and revenue profiles, evolve your market offering, partner with the right vendors, get your implementation, service delivery and support offer in order and your people that go with it, and adapt your sales and go-to-market approach to focus on service benefits and not product features.
Yeah, that's the big thing. What you're selling is very different to the old on-prem world where it was all about speeds, feeds, and features.
So, and you said something else about start small and test. I like that. If you're focusing on the scale of adoption and not necessarily the scale of that initial acquisition, starting small and growing these oak trees from little acorns is a good way to run a business from a financial perspective. It's also a good way to de-risk a business.
And build confidence. You think about this one. Salespeople are coin operated. Don't forget it.
Yeah.
If they spend 6-8 months working on a really complex deal with a load of resource allocated to it, and because they haven't actually got all their offers, their models, their processes sorted out, and they lose it, what's the outcome of that going to be? It's not going to be positive. Their confidence is going to be shot. They're going to be skeptical. And if you're trying to change your business, that is a bad place to be. So, start small, learn, build your confidence. Even if you're targeting larger accounts, larger companies, look for the small opportunities to deploy. It's okay to go and do a 5-10 seat.
And with that, I think we're done for this episode. So we're going to be back next time with episode 10 into double figures. In the meantime, I'd ask our listeners and anyone else who's out there to follow the Angus and Pete Show on LinkedIn for news and notifications. Keep messaging us directly. Keep telling us what you want us to talk about. Give us the feedback. Tell us how we're doing. And keep that post bag bulging.
The show's available on all your favorite podcast platforms. So please keep listening. And more importantly, please like and subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. And the key one, big ask from us, please share this out to help us spread the word and feed our egos. But Pete, hold on.
Very good. Yes.
We always end off with a joke of the week. What have you got for us this week?
Well, I haven't got anything because, ta-da, one of our listeners has sent me a joke that they'd like me to do on their behalf. They have asked to remain anonymous, which will give you some hint as to the quality. But here we go. Angus, why did the amplifier salesman get fired?
No idea. Now you're in a totally different industry.
He wasn't doing the volume of sales required.
Oh, God. Okay, right. Now I know why that person wants to be anonymous.
Cheers, Angus.
Cheers, Pete.
Thanks for tuning in to the Angus and Pete Show. Remember, it's based on the personal views and opinions of the hosts and their guests. If you're feeling aggrieved or litigious, take a chill pill. There's already enough stress in the world. Don't forget to follow our page on LinkedIn and subscribe on your favourite podcast platform for more episodes. We'll see you next time. Oh, and tell your friends.